Julie Legg, author of The Missing Piece and diagnosed with ADHD at 52.
And I'm Gel Legg, diagnosed at 55.
Welcome to ADH Difference. In this episode, we're going to be talking about creativity. And for ADHDers, it's a mighty strength. So whether it is art, photography, dance, writing, music, systems, DIY, craft, you name it, we're pretty good at using our creativity in our everyday lives.
Indeed. I think our list of creative endeavours, I should say, are quite long, aren't they?
Yeah.
Go on, throw off some of yours first.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned off camera that we are creative from the moment we wake up to the second hour, we drift off into sleep land. And it's not always the big things. We're creative in little ways as well. Whether it be being creative in the kitchen, for example, whipping up a recipe, or not following instructions and making it your way. But right now, for me, I'm a writer, author. I do food photography. I am creative in the garden, and when it comes to preserving the fruits of the harvest. I have been an actor, a screen actor for 25, 30 years, along with a voiceover artist. So not only is it fun things to do, we've been able to make a living out of some of our creativity as well.
And I think I've always been creative. Well, I have always been creative. What struck me when we were having this off-camera conversation is I had to stop and try and think what creativity actually was, because I can't put it in boxes, because I think I'm actually creative from morning till night. There aren't many occasions I'm not creative. Even silly things like cutting the lawns, which take quite a few hours to do, I can find different ways to go faster, or different routes, or something that's more efficient. That sounds silly, but actually I think creativity isn't just being a painter, a photographer, a musician, whatever. I think it's a whole mindset and how you approach everything. So it can be as simple as how you write an email, how you structure that email. Are you trying to get across a point that is a bit tricky, so use some creative writing to try to make your point, or to soften the blow on something. It really applies to everything. How you solve a problem, even silly things like using a leaf blower, which can be a bit challenging, especially when it's windy. Coming up with solutions all the time that make a job easier, a simple gardening job. So creativity to me is a mindset, and it's something that I think can be applied to everything, pretty much all day long, one way or another, in the smallest possible ways sometimes.
As a kid, I have always been creative as well, but I didn't do the big creative things. So almost I had creativity as an aspiration that I felt I never could into those gates. And this is crazy because I was doing theatre, community theatre at primary school. I was, learning to tap dance. I was a creative writer through poetry. I was into singing groups and the rest. I was very creative. But my mother was and still is, but doesn't do so much of it now, a brilliant charcoal artist. And she was an amazing pianist and a stage actor. And for me, it kind of, it was normal. Our family was very creative, and I thought I'd have to be outstanding in order to fit the creative box, if that makes sense, to be able to give myself that label. So again, been in bands for many, many years, and yet it's only really in the last 10 years or so that I've acknowledged my creativity and looked back and thought, oh gosh, yeah, I have, from dot, I've been creative. But at the time it kind of, I didn't see it as that. I just saw it as a normal thing to do.
Yeah, that really sort of illustrates the point that if you judge whether you're, as an ADHDer, creative, and you look at someone who is very accomplished in certain arts, or people in your life, people around you, you're very quick to give up sometimes and think, well, I'm not that good, therefore I'm not creative. But that's not the way to go. That's not the way to go. You know, all achievements in any art field really are incremental steps from the first time you start doing it. And the way I approach art in relation to ADHD is I get huge dopamine hits off achieving something. Now, it doesn't have to be the very best art. It doesn't have to have great accolades, and it doesn't have to be what society would judge as a success. It's what I judge as a success. So is something I'm doing artistically today better than what it was yesterday or a year or 10 years ago? And if the answer is yes, then that's good enough for me. It's just incremental steps, getting better at something. And then one day you suddenly, let's use the example where we are at the moment when our recording, we have a small recording studio. And so from here we can produce albums, and they're available all over the world, and they're hugely, well, I'm very proud of them. I think they're very professional sounding albums. But heck, you know, even 10 years ago, I didn't think I could do that, even though I've been a bass player for 30, 40 years now. So 10, 12 years ago, I sat down and thought, okay, if I want to do the entire process, how do I learn this? It doesn't just happen in one day or 1 week or 1 year. And it took about 4 or 5 years of really getting to the bottom of how all this stuff around us works, how to use it, and how to turn it into something at the end that I'm extraordinarily proud of. And this incremental thing and looking back is really important, because we recently have started reworking songs and released some songs that we wrote when we were together 25 years ago nearly. And so we've got original recordings of them. And at the time, I remember thinking, wow, that's just, what a recording. That's incredible. How did we manage to do that? Sounds fantastic. And now it sounds absolutely terrible next to what we're doing now. Absolutely terrible. The song's the same, the words are the same, the lyrics, and it's a great song or whatever, but the recording's atrocious. So, you know, at what point do you say, I can't do this, I'm rubbish, I give up? Or just find something. Okay, so how do you find that something? Well, for me, as I mentioned when I started this section, it's the dopamine hit of each step, each incremental step. If you tap that dopamine hit into what you're doing as a creative and you get the buzz back and you go, that is a bit better than it was last time, that's a really good way to motivate you to keep going forward. And right here and right now, it's a bigger dopamine hit than ever. It doesn't disappear. And come in this studio, I can start from nothing, create an idea, have a song underway in a few days, and I'm buzzing, absolutely buzzing. And that will never go, hopefully.
I think that if it's an area that we're interested in or that holds our interest, we're more likely to persevere and use our, you know, through our curious nature to, let's see if we can push it a bit further, as you've said, Jill. But for those areas that we're actually not that interested in, me personally, I'll just give up. I think I went to play golf once and I could barely hit the ball. Do you call it a ball?
It's a
golf ball, yeah. And so I'll never play golf again. And, you know, I never have. And it doesn't bother me because I was never really interested in golf in the first place. But when it comes to something creative, yeah, definitely I'll keep having a wee little go at it and maybe have a bit of a Google or get some inspiration elsewhere, or just think of a completely different way of attacking it or attacking the project. But the women that I interviewed for The Missing Piece, now they were hugely creative as well. They were into dance and theatre and problem solving. They could even make some mundane tasks quite interesting just by having a creative approach to it, which stood them well. But there were those that felt that they were really creative as a child, but as an adult, it's kind of, I don't know, it's gone past the wayside. Is that the term?
Yeah, I guess you can.
Yeah, just because life has got in the way, they felt, they probably weren't that good at it, or just life's pressures, and they don't give any time to their creative self. And that there was an element of sadness around that because they knew it was within them, but they've kind of let that But go.
Okay, so that reminds me, I was thinking earlier when we were talking about doing this episode, if you take this thing called creativity and put it in a box and then surround it with barbed wire and lots of defenses, you say, that's there, it's there. That's a thing that I need to do sometime when I'm not busy working or going about my daily life. But that's not the thing to do with creativity. Creativity can be with you all day long, constantly there. And it's about understanding creativity of what it actually really means. And it can pop up in your job. You know, it's recognizing and giving yourself a pat on the back that I solved that problem through a bit of creative thinking. And allowing yourself to say, yeah, okay, that's cool. So don't put it in a box and just, you know. So we've got the dopamine hit from it. Now it's gone out of my mind. There was another thing to do with hyperfocus. Yes. Now, so we always need to come back to these key words that define ADHD. So dopamine hit, the hyperfocus. Once you start seeing something you're doing as creative, you kind of like, well, for me, I'm quite hyperfocus driven. I get a bit obsessed with it. And then that's when those incremental steps start to get bigger and bigger, and they start snowballing and rolling, and you find yourself getting quite good at something that, you know, only a few months or years, whatever before, you just thought, no hope, never better do this.
And creativity too it's a very personal thing. And we shouldn't really compare ourselves with others when it comes to creativity. Your cake that you baked might be awesome. You don't need other people to judge your cake. As long as you've been creative and you've enjoyed that whole process and you've made it your own, that's what's to celebrate. I think, as you said, there's a lot of crossover traits that can interrupt creativity. There's the imposter syndrome, perfectionism that can trip us up sometimes. Hyperfocus, as you said, maybe we're creative far too long in our day and it actually sort of disrupts the balance of the rest of our lives.
I just dive in there. Yeah, that's really, really, that reminds me of something too. So this judgment, you create something and it doesn't matter whether it's a bit rubbish or it's awesome. You don't allow other people to judge it. That's a really, really negative space to go into. Create it for your own satisfaction, for your own reward, and let it just be for what it is. As a musician, all my life, I've really detested contests, band contests and competitions as songwriters because it always means there's losers. You know, sport is about competition. That's what sport is. Sure, if you want to turn your music into a business, then, well, we have to have a different mindset for that. But I've never really gone down that avenue. I think... Well, I have gone down that avenue of doing more commercial music years ago. And it was a bit of a soulless place. It didn't really satisfy what I was trying to do as a creative. Sure, there were the dopamine hits as you got the radio play or something was happening that was a bit quite exciting. But I could already see actually that was leading down a path that was not going to be grounded in creativity, it'd be grounded in business. And now, if I wanted to be a really successful business person, I wouldn't probably go into music. I probably would have opened a chain of dry cleaners or something. Creativity and art are all about your expression of your feelings, your story to tell, and then how someone relates back to that. And heaps of people won't like your story or your art or your expression, but that's fine.
That reminded me of the storytelling. So my mother is very creative from a traditional point of view, as I said, actress and singer and all sorts. My father would say that he doesn't have a creative bone in his body. That's what he would say. But he is the best storyteller. And he writes amazing short stories. Now, he would say... You know, I'm not creative like the rest of you, but he's really good. And it's that storytelling. And as you've said, whether it's through a sculpture, whether it's through pen and paper writing or through a camera lens or just the way you go about presenting your garden, your veggie patch, how you've used DIY to create interesting little trinkets around the house or your garden. It's all telling a story, and it's very personal. And I think it's something to celebrate. And you've got to celebrate it yourself first. You can't rely on others to pat you on the back and encourage you. Just acknowledging that yourself is a massive thing.
Back to this ADHD. So we are a creative bunch because our neurons fire off in all sorts of different ways. We connect and see things differently. We find different paths to solutions. And really, that's where the heart of creativity is, rather than just following the standard route and
or a paint by number.
Yeah, paint by number and just repeating the same thing. So we are inherently creative. So, yeah, we do know that it's often said that people give up or struggle with it, but actually we just don't give up. Just don't set your sights so high that you're bound to fail. I keep coming back to this incremental step. Start with something simple and build up your confidence. And here's a good one. When you read your old school reports, if you're lucky enough to still have them, you often find your creativity is in there as a child in how you approach things in the class. And it's the clues that it didn't mean anything to you when you came home at 12 and handed it to your parents. And so at least I'm not in trouble for this one. But actually, there's often signs there. And, sometimes look back 30 years, depending on how old you are, and see what you were doing when you were a child. If you've got your old drawings and pictures, if you still have pictures you drew when you were 10 or painted, you might be surprised how good they were. And you might sit down now with the same pen and go, there's a blockage. I can't draw or paint like that. Yes, you can, but there's this blockage, that stops you allowing yourself to be creative. Perhaps that's the thing, isn't it? Allowing yourself. And don't let anyone put you down, ever.
Absolutely. This non-linear approach to things, and as you said, with our neurons going bing, bing, bing and bouncing all over the place. For me as a child, I had such a creative mind. I was in heaven because I never could get bored because my brain actually wouldn't allow it. And I spent some time on an island without electricity, and the house we were in, that is, not the whole island. But I'd spent a lot of time outside, and I'd imagine that I was in a circus troupe. And so I had this teddy bear, and I'd tie it to a pole and throw darts at it.
Poor teddy bear.
I know, the poor little thing. Not to be mean, but it's just, I imagine that's what one would do.
The teddy bear that.
That's what you do in the circus, isn't it? I had this little tree swing, and I'd be standing on it and, trying to be a high trapeze performer. It was always there. So it's fun where our creative mind can take us.
I thought of something almost completely opposite to sacrificing teddy bears. So I've been privileged in my career at times to work with some extraordinarily talented and clever people in the space industry in particular. Most of the people around me had PhDs or were working on PhDs in the most obscure things like microchannel technologies for space satellite instrumentation, parts of components of systems that just meant nothing, that couldn't even be explained to me. And along with the electronics engineers I've worked with over the years, you might at first hand, if you were at a party with them, think they are the least creative, most logical people you've ever come across. There's nothing that lights the room up necessarily about them. But heck, are they creative? Are they creative? Even if you're using pure science, pure engineering, if you're doing research work, you're doing work and finding solutions to something that in theory no one else has done. That's the whole point of a PhD. It has to be a unique piece of research. So you don't just get to the end by reading everyone else's work and saying, there's the answer there and there's the answer there. You have to use your imagination and be creative and come up with new ways of looking at things. So you may be listening and thinking, well, I'm not creative because I'm, the left side, right side of the brain, I'm 99% logical. No, you are creative. You are. You may be a computer programmer, a brilliant one. Well, you can't tell me that writing code isn't creative, because it is. It simply is. I know because I do it. Not very well, but I do it.
You've also been creative as a kid too, and I will prompt you on this one.
Okay.
You used to enjoy going to the local tip.
Oh, yes.
That was an awesome day out for you as a child. Why?
Well, yeah, we can't do it anymore. Health and safety, you're not allowed to, you throw something away, it's in a skip and it's gone. But in this, I guess, late 70s, when I was a kid, we had these same places you get rid of rubbish, but you were allowed to clamber all over them, and lots of people did, and they would take things out and they would repurpose them, recycle them, upcycle them. I guess from a health and safety viewpoint, it could be argued as dangerous, but boy, oh boy, I would come home with old tape players, reel-to-reel tape players, old televisions, all sorts of obscure bits of electronics, and then I could take them apart and get the switches and the parts out of them. Then we'd take the carcass back to the dump. But incredible finds, and I loved it.
You were doing that. I mean, you built your first amplifier at aged...
Oh, heavens, I suppose 9 or 10. By 11, I was building a synthesizer from magazine kit. Well, sort of, not really kits. I couldn't afford kits, but you'd find the circuits and you work out what all the bits did. And then you go to the shop. It's like buying lollies, It's like, I'll have 2 of those and 1 of those. All that red one there, I'll have a couple of those. They're just like lollies, and then you sort of solder them all together. And most of the time, it would just go up with a puff of smoke on the thing. But it was creative because I wasn't designing it. I wasn't that clever. I was just a kid, but it was creative. It still was creative.
And that's happening still now. Until very recently, you had lots of leftover bits of wood. And so I'd be running through the garden going, oh, you know what? I think we need some bird boxes. It's almost nesting season. Hang on a minute, says Jill. And off he goes into the garage, and all these little offcuts of wood that's been clogging up the garage for years. And all of a sudden you come up with this amazing thing, complete with, a little birdhouse with a chimney and a TV antenna just to be cute. And, it's...
But I never throw anything
creative.
away. I mean, because you start with a long piece of wood that costs $30 or something, and that's great. I mean, you need that piece of wood, and then you cut it down, and there's some bits left over. But you start that long piece of wood, and you cut a small piece off because you need that small piece. But it's having stuff that is there in the future. So if you're inspired to make or do something, at least you've got the materials around you. Materials, resources, there's a good one. So you think you might fancy yourself learning how to paint, as in artist with a brush and so forth. Don't have to go and spend $1,000 on all the gear, but get some basic stuff. And it might sit in the cupboard for 6 months. And then one day you just pick it up and start messing around, mixing some colours. You don't know until you try.
And the other thing too is that we have in our minds, we can already see the finished result, and it's going to be amazing because we can see it in our minds. That's what we think.
Mind's eye.
But actually, when it comes to getting it out of our head and onto paper, or onto that canvas, or onto that clay spinning wheel, it's not quite as easy as that. And I think a lot of people give up. They can imagine it, but they can't implement it. But your suggestion too is, being kind to yourself and just starting at the basics and learning and working things through, and not giving up at the first hurdle.
Yeah, because we ADHDers we really do. We are often very creative. I often think, you read all the time, why are so many actors and musicians and singers and famous people in creative industries getting diagnosed? It doesn't surprise me at all. It's a heck of a motivator or driver in certain areas when you focus it and push it into a very pointed direction. It does bring up all sorts of other things, and certainly will be other episodes, but burnout. You can burn out when being too focused. You can be too creative. You've got to find that balance. But I do highly associate ADHD and creativity. I really do. And as I said, when we started, I had to stop and think about what creativity probably was because it seems to be something that we just have from morning till night, whether it's some of the paid work we do or whether it's just what we do when we're not working. every time I walk in the kitchen, you're writing a blog or something. You're doing something creative, or
I know when I should be probably doing something not so creative, which goes to the bottom of my list. And in fact, I don't have a list. It just doesn't get done. The bits, the non-creative things aren't so much fun at all. But, even little things. I've talked about our veggie patch and, come harvest time, we'll have 30 pumpkins, are far too much. We give a lot away to friends and family and through our crop swap that we go to regularly. But I've just got to find creative ways of using it.
My music teacher, who had no time for me because I was rubbish at music at school, not interested, he said something that always stuck with me. He's trying to get us to sort of sing a note. And I can't sing. I really can't. And I thought, I'm tone deaf. And he said, in all my career, I've only ever met one person who was actually tone deaf. Everyone else is just a bit rubbish at singing, but all could be improved with some effort.
Now, I'm going to step in here because, at times we agree you're not quite on track when you sing. However,
out of tune's the word you're looking for.
Yeah, but actually what I think you're doing is you're trying to sing lead and a harmony at the same time. So it kind of makes sense. It's just perhaps in a different scale.
Well, if it mattered, I'd go for some lessons.
I know,
but you're the singer, so it doesn't really needed.
But what I'm meaning though is that actually you can sing. You can sing, but I think your mind is going ping, ping, ping all over the place, and that trying to get a note out, sometimes it's bang on, and other times it kind of has its own little.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's its own little path.
I certainly can't sing enough to sing a song and release it to the public and think there's any reason inflicting it on the public. But I can sing or try to use my voice enough to show you a harmony idea I've got that perhaps then you pick it up and go somewhere with it. And great, we've got a result. Because I'm trying to communicate with you I can't say sing A, C sharp, F. It doesn't work like that. I have to try to communicate it. So creativity is communication.
I think being around creatives, it's catching. Their enthusiasm and the excitement and the dopamine, you get the energy level is just so heightened. And it's lovely being in a room full of creatives.
Now that's okay. That's really good thinking. It's being around people who acknowledge they're creative and do the best they can with their creativity. That's the infectious part. Yes. If your group of friends or the people you're with are the people that don't think they're creative at all and just quash any sense of it in themselves, then they're going to squash it in you. And you may end up masking. You end up thinking, this is... Yeah, I am probably a bit rubbish. Who am I? I'm not a tall poppy. I mean, everyone around me is rubbish.
That's your imposter syndrome.
That's my imposter syndrome.
but masking is that. Do you think if I was a famous or if I was a singer, I'd have to sell lots of albums before someone would acknowledge me. No, that's imposter syndrome too. Masking. Maybe I should look this way. If I'm going to be an artist, I need to look this way. Well, no, just be yourself.
Nothing worse than trying to be like someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're an individual and you're an alternative thinker. Just do it your way, and you can guarantee you'll do it well if you do it your way.
Yeah, and you're only doing it well enough yourself.
Yeah.
If you're lucky that some other people genuinely think that it was well done. If you get more than that, well done, awesome. But if you're only doing it for yourself and I wouldn't say judge, and I certainly wouldn't say critic, but the only person that should measure how well you think you're doing is yourself. And just remember, that's your dopamine. That's you giving yourself the pat on the back as you get better at what you do. And
isn't it interesting? Yeah. As a parent, your child comes to you with a crayon drawing, and you go, "Wow, I love the colours." Wow, wow! Tell me about it. Oh, this is you and the family. We're at the beach, and this is a seagull. Oh, yes, of course it is.
Of course it is. Thought it was an explosion in a firework factory.
But we, for the people we love, as a parent, we're full of this really genuine and generous, applaud and encouragement for the younger people. As you get older, you don't necessarily get that in your life anymore, do you?
You don't.
And if someone was to say, "Oh, well, that painting's a bit rubbish, really. I don't quite get the perspectives," or a song, I don't quite understand what you're trying to say.
As we get older, we're expected, in our 50s, we're expected to be brilliant at what we do. Because, people my age are brilliant music producers and they've got a great long history of great success.
Some are.
Some are and some
The
aren't.
majority aren't.
No, but we're expected to be brilliant. And we, as adults, we very quickly lose our innocence and our support for people who we should say, if they do show you show your art to someone, your creative endeavors, if they're kind and loving, they should say, yeah, absolutely, I'd keep doing that if I were you.
I don't quite understand it, but hey, wow.
Great.
It looks very complicated and wow, good on you. Yeah, exactly. I know, there are nice ways, nice responses.
So, hang on, then we go full circle, don't we? Because if we're scared of criticism, we mask. And but we mustn't stop that creativity. And we mustn't put it in this box that it's got to be a specific label.
Yes, It can be anything from problem solving, making the mundane fun, through to creating new systems.
Communicating's a good one. How you communicate, written, verbal, facial.
You're telling a story, and it can be done through so many different ways, as we said earlier, through art or dance or speech or theatre or photography or you name it. It's a beautiful thing. So don't
or simple
stop
things. Simple things. The simplest of job. It doesn't matter how simple the job is. If you come up with better ways of doing your simple job, you're being creative.
That's a frustrating thing, though, in a work environment when you're told, this is how we do it.
Always done it this way.
We do this one, and then we do that, and then we do that.
As we sort of draw to an end on this one, I think it reminds me of the work environments we've been in. We have often been in an environment where we bring system ideas to the organizational way an environment works. And this could be made better, faster. This could be done cheaper. And you do often get this kickback, don't you? Well, we've always done it this way. I don't see any reason to change it now. Well, I can see a reason to change it. And therein, perhaps there's another episode when we should talk about work environments, because that's when your creativity, I can't paint, I can't sing, but actually at work, you're changing things, you're implementing system changes that's improving things for the company, the profit, the satisfaction of the people working in that company. And it's this blue sky, that's that corporate word, blue sky thinking, this creative thinking that often companies desperately need in order to improve. And because they don't change, if they stay still, they go backwards. Isn't that the expression or something like that? And change comes from creativity. So it's not always this box of something that, the arts, there's the word I'm looking for. If you're a change person that goes into companies and changes them for the better, you're not an artist, but you are a creative.
So
subtle difference, isn't there?
Therefore, creativity is thinking outside.
Don't say the word, you said it, the box. Oh dear, no, it's outside. There was all the barbed wire around that. We've got a real pet hate for all those dreadful corporate expressions. Anyway, should we run that up the flagpole and see what happens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My door's always open.
Yeah, blue sky thinking.
Are you with me?
You're with me.